What would you do if a 9-year-old boy sitting outside a hospital, wearing boots held together with duct tape, looked you in the eye and said, "I can make your daughter walk again"? You'd laugh. You'd walk away. But what if he was right? It was a cold morning in Birmingham, Alabama. Not cold enough for snow, but cold enough to make your breath visible and your fingers ache. People rushed in and out of the Children's Medical Center, wrapped in coats, clutching coffee cups, moving fast, like speed alone could protect them from bad news. Everyone was moving. Everyone except one boy. Ezekiel Carter sat just far enough from the revolving doors that security wouldn't immediately notice him, but close enough to see every face that passed through the glass. He was small for his age, not sickly, just quiet small, like the kind of kid the world learned to step around instead of noticing. His coat hung off his shoulders, a size or two too big, the sleeves rolled twice to keep them from swallowing his hands. A red knit beanie rested low on his forehead, stretching slightly where it had been pulled on and off too many times. One boot had a strip of gray duct tape wrapped around the toe, creased and dirty from weeks of walking. In his lap rested a notebook. The cover was bent. The pages were smudged with pencil marks and fingerprints. Inside were sketches, hands, legs, faces, lines drawn and redrawn, as if he were trying to remember something important before it faded. Zeke didn't beg. That was the first thing people noticed once they noticed him at all. He didn't hold out a cup, didn't ask for spare change, didn't even look up most of the time. He watched. He watched the way parents held their children tighter when they walked in. He watched the way some people walked out smiling while others stared at the ground. He watched the doctors who walked fast and the janitors who moved quietly, and he learned who nodded at him and who pretended he wasn't there. Some of the nurses knew him. One would slip him a granola bar now and then. Another once asked if he was waiting for someone. Zeke had smiled politely and said, "Yes, ma'am." It wasn't exactly a lie. He was waiting. Most Saturdays, Zeke showed up just after sunrise. He stayed until the light changed and the cold crept deeper into his bones. He never caused trouble, and eventually, that made him invisible enough to stay. That morning, he had been drawing legs. Not shoes, not pants, just legs. Bent, straight, moving. Across the street, traffic slowed as cars pulled in and out of the parking structure. Zeke glanced up when a dark silver SUV rolled to a stop near the fire hydrant and didn't move. Something about it caught his attention. The engine idled, humming softly, like it didn't want to turn off. Jonathan Reeves sat behind the wheel longer than necessary, staring straight ahead through the windshield. His reflection in the glass barely looked like him anymore. Once, he had been the kind of man people listened to the first time he spoke. Clean suits, confident posture, a voice that didn't waver. Now his tie was loosened, collar wrinkled, and the faint lines at the corners of his eyes had deepened into something heavier, something carved there by sleepless nights and words he could never take back. In the back seat, his daughter Isla sat quietly in her booster seat. She was wrapped in a pink blanket that used to be her favorite. Once, she had dragged it around the house like a cape. Now it stayed tucked around her legs, hiding what no longer worked. Her curls were still the same, soft, brown, falling into her eyes the way they always had. But her voice was gone. Not literally, but the sound of it, the way she used to fill rooms without trying. Jonathan reached back and brushed a curl away from her face. "Ready, kiddo?" he asked softly. She nodded. That was all she did now. Nod or shake her head, like words took too much energy. Jonathan killed the engine and stepped out into the cold. He moved to the back seat and opened the door carefully, as if sudden movements might break something fragile. When he lifted Isla, she felt lighter than she should have. That thought always hit him the same way, sharp and sudden, followed by guilt for thinking it at all. She wrapped her arms around his neck automatically, her head resting against his shoulder as if she had practiced that position. They crossed the street together. Jonathan's eyes stayed fixed on the hospital entrance, not because he wanted to be there, but because looking anywhere else felt dangerous. That's when he heard the voice, not loud, not dramatic, just certain. "Sir." Jonathan stopped. He turned slowly, irritation already rising in his chest, until he saw who had spoken. A boy, 9, maybe 10 at most, too thin, too quiet, too calm. "I can make your daughter walk again." The words landed wrong, not like a joke, not like a plea, like a statement. Jonathan's grip tightened around Isla. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice sharper than he intended. The boy stepped closer, notebook tucked under his arm. "I can help her walk again." Jonathan stared at him. Then he laughed once, short, empty. "That's not funny. I'm not joking," the boy said. Jonathan's eyes dropped to the duct-taped boot, the oversized coat, the red beanie pulled down too far. Something inside him hardened. He turned without another word and walked into the hospital, the boy's voice echoing behind him like something unfinished. But all day, through every appointment, every careful explanation, every well-meaning phrase about time and patience and acceptance, Jonathan heard the same sentence: I can help her walk again. And no matter how hard he tried to crush it, the thought stayed alive. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Jonathan sat in a vinyl chair that squeaked every time he shifted his weight. Isla rested against him, her head tilted slightly to one side, eyes fixed on the television mounted high on the wall. A cartoon played without sound, bright colors moving across the screen, but she didn't react. Jonathan pretended to listen as a physical therapist explained the next phase of treatment. Progress isn't always visible, the woman said gently, especially this early. He nodded. Another doctor spoke next, then another. They used careful language, professional language, the kind that wrapped disappointment in soft edges so it wouldn't cut too deep. Jonathan had heard it all before. Long road, small milestones, patience, but none of their voices followed him the way that boy's had. I can help her walk again. The sentence repeated itself, quiet but relentless. He caught himself scanning the hallway between appointments, half expecting to see the red beanie again. When he didn't, irritation flared, at the boy, at himself, at the small, dangerous spark that had lit up somewhere he'd buried hope months ago. By early afternoon, Isla's energy was gone. Her eyelids drooped, her grip around his arm loosening as exhaustion took over. Jonathan signed one last form and carried her back outside. The sun had broken through the clouds, but the cold hadn't softened. As he crossed the sidewalk toward the SUV, his chest tightened. The boy was still there. Same spot, same box, same notebook. Only now, he wasn't drawing. He was waiting. Jonathan slowed. He told himself to keep walking, to get in the car and leave, to protect himself from disappointment. But something pulled him back. He set Isla gently into the back seat, tucking the blanket around her legs, then closed the door and turned. You, he said, walking toward the boy. Why would you say something like that? The boy looked up calmly. Because I saw her, he said. Jonathan scoffed. You saw a kid in a wheelchair. Congratulations. You want a medal? I saw how you held her, the boy replied. Like you're afraid to breathe. Jonathan stopped short. His jaw tightened. You don't know us, he snapped. You don't know what she's been through. The boy stood, dusting off his coat. I don't have to, he said quietly. I just have to help. Jonathan laughed again, sharper this time. You're a kid sitting outside a hospital with duct tape on your shoes. What do you think you know about helping someone like my daughter? The boy hesitated for the first time. My mom helped people walk, he said. She was a physical therapist. She taught me things. Jonathan crossed his arms. So you watched a few stretches and now you think you're a doctor? No, the boy said. I think I'm patient. That answer unsettled him more than the rest. Jonathan glanced around. A nurse passed by and gave the boy a small wave. A janitor nodded at him like they were familiar. You're not asking for money? Jonathan asked suspiciously. The boy shook his head. Then what do you want? 1 hour, he said. That's it. Jonathan looked back at the SUV. Through the window, Isla's eyes were open. She was watching them. Hope stirred, uninvited and dangerous. He exhaled sharply. Tomorrow, Jonathan said. Harrington Park, noon. The boy nodded once. I'll be there. Harrington Park looked forgotten. A cracked basketball court sat off to one side, the paint faded and peeling. Swings creaked in the wind. A massive oak tree stood near the center, its branches wide and patient, casting long shadows over patchy grass. Jonathan almost turned the car around. He parked anyway. The boy was already there. He sat on a bench beneath the oak tree, jacket zipped, a small gym bag at his feet. A folded towel rested beside him. Jonathan lifted Isla from the car and set her gently into her wheelchair. His shoulders were tight, his posture defensive, like he was bracing for disappointment. The boy stood as they approached. Hi, he said politely. Isla lifted her hand and waved shyly. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. You know her name? You said it yesterday, the boy replied. I remember things. Jonathan didn't comment. So, he said, gesturing at the towel. What now? Magic tricks? The boy ignored the sarcasm. He opened his bag and laid out his supplies. A pair of clean socks, a tennis ball, a small jar of cocoa butter, and a cloth-wrapped pack of warm rice. This is what my mom used, he said. Heat helps muscles relax. Jonathan watched closely as the boy knelt beside Isla. If it's okay, the boy said gently to her, I'll move your legs a little. If anything feels weird, you tell me to stop. Isla glanced at her father. Jonathan hesitated, then nodded. Careful. The boy placed the warm pack over Isla's thighs. Too hot? He asked. She shook her head. It feels nice. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Slowly, the boy began to move her legs. Small motions. No forcing. Just gentle rotations, like he was reminding them they still existed. You ever do this before? Jonathan asked. My mom took me to shelters, the boy replied. She helped people who couldn't afford therapy. Said everyone deserved to feel human again. Jonathan fell silent. After several minutes, the boy tapped lightly on Isla's knee. Do you feel that? She hesitated. No, that's okay, he said calmly. I'll keep asking. Time passed. Then, wait, Isla whispered. The boy froze. What do you feel? Pressure, she said. Jonathan's breath caught. The boy looked up at him. That's something. Jonathan swallowed. For the first time in months, he didn't argue. He just watched. The second Sunday was warmer, but Zeke still wore his jacket. Not because he needed it, because it reminded him of his mother. She used to call it his helper's coat. Said every good healer needed something that reminded them why they cared when caring got hard. By the time Jonathan's SUV pulled into Harrington Park, Zeke already had the towel laid out and the rice pack warming in the sun. Isla was smiling before the car even stopped. Hi, Zeke, she said, as Jonathan lifted her out. Zeke smiled back. Hey, superstar. Jonathan noticed the change immediately. It scared him. Hope was dangerous. They went through the routine. Heat, gentle stretching, toe movements. Zeke explained everything slowly, like teaching someone how to listen instead of how to fix. Your brain's like a map, he told Isla. Some roads just got blocked. Doesn't mean they're gone. She closed her eyes and tried to wiggle her toes. Nothing. Her smile faltered. That's okay, Zeke said quickly. Sometimes the message gets lost. We just send it again. Jonathan stood behind them, arms crossed, not defensively this time, but because he didn't know where to put his hands. Why do you do this? He asked suddenly. Zeke looked up. Because I remember what it felt like when my mom helped people. They'd cry sometimes. Not because it hurt, but because someone didn't give up on them. Jonathan nodded slowly. Then Isla spoke. My legs feel tired, she said. Jonathan stiffened. We can stop. Zeke shook his head gently. Tired isn't bad. It means something woke up. They rested. They tried again. This time, Isla's foot moved. Not much, but enough. Jonathan's throat tightened. That night, at home, Jonathan sat alone in his office, staring at nothing. Papers lay untouched on his desk. His phone buzzed repeatedly. He didn't answer, because for the first time since the accident, the numbness had cracked, and underneath it was fear. The fourth Sunday started wrong. Jonathan could feel it the moment Isla refused to get dressed. I don't want to go, she muttered, staring at the floor. Why? He asked softly. Because what if it doesn't work anymore? The words hit harder than anger ever could. At the park, Isla wouldn't look at Zeke, her arms crossed tight over her chest. I tried this morning, she said sharply. Nothing happened. I'm tired of trying. Jonathan clenched his jaw. Zeke knelt beside her slowly. You think I never get tired? He asked quietly. She didn't respond. You think I didn't cry when my mom got sick? When I had to sit in shelters and pretend I wasn't scared? Isla's eyes shifted toward him. You're allowed to be mad, Zeke continued. But if you stop now, the part of you that wants to walk might stop trying too. Silence. Then Isla whispered, I'm scared. Jonathan turned away, his chest burning. Zeke leaned closer. Me too. But scared doesn't mean stop. She nodded. They tried again. Less talking. More patience. Then it happened. Isla's right foot slid forward, not a toe. Her foot. Jonathan dropped to his knees. Do it again, he whispered. She did. Jonathan laughed and cried at the same time. Later that night, as Jonathan stood outside his house, staring at the moon, he realized something had changed. Not just in Isla's legs. Something inside him had started to heal. Jonathan didn't offer Zeke a place to stay right away. At first, he just asked small questions. Where do you go after the park? What do you eat? You got somewhere warm at night? Zeke's answers were never direct. Depends. Sometimes. I manage. Jonathan understood what those words meant. One evening, after another long Sunday at Harrington Park, Jonathan watched Zeke pack his things slowly, carefully folding the towel, tightening the strap on his worn gym bag, checking his supplies twice like someone who couldn't afford to lose anything. You want a sandwich? Jonathan asked casually, holding out a paper bag. Zeke hesitated, then nodded. Thanks. That night, Jonathan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the way Zeke showed up every week without being asked, how he never complained, how he carried loss quietly. The next morning, Jonathan opened the front door and found Zeke standing on the porch with a backpack slung over one shoulder and a rolled-up blanket under his arm. You said I could come by, Zeke said carefully. Jonathan swallowed. Yeah, he replied. I did. From that day on, Zeke had a room. It wasn't fancy, just a bed, a desk, and a lamp. But it was warm. and for the first time in a long while, Zeke slept without listening for footsteps in the dark. At Harrington Park, something else was changing. A nurse from the Children's Medical Center recognized Isla one Sunday morning. "You're standing taller," she said, confused. Jonathan smiled. "She's trying." Word traveled fast. The next weekend, 2 families showed up. Then 4. Parents with cautious hope. Kids with braces, walkers, wheelchairs. Zeke didn't hesitate. He showed them what he knew. He spoke gently. He never promised miracles. "You're not broken," he told one boy quietly. "You're just learning a new way to be strong." By the end of the month, Harrington Park wasn't quiet anymore. It was alive. The 9th Sunday felt different. The air was warm. The oak tree swayed slowly. Even Isla was quiet, focused. Jonathan wheeled her to the center of the mat. Zeke knelt in front of her. "Same plan," he said softly. "We help you stand. You do the rest." Jonathan positioned himself behind her, hands ready, heart racing. "Okay," Zeke said. "On 3. 1. Isla inhaled. 2. Her fingers curled. 3. Jonathan lifted gently. Zeke steadied her knees, and Isla stood. Her legs trembled, her arms shook, but she was standing. The park fell silent. Jonathan let go. She stayed upright. Tears blurred his vision. "I'm standing," Isla whispered. Zeke nodded. "Yeah, you are." Then she took a step, then another. On the 3rd step, she fell into her father's arms laughing. Jonathan held her tightly, crying openly now. "You did it," he whispered. "You really did it." Isla looked past him at Zeke. "You said I could," she said. Zeke smiled softly. "I said we'd try." Moral of the story. Not all healers wear white coats. Not all heroes carry titles. Some carry patience. Some carry pain. Some carry the courage to keep showing up even when no one is watching. And sometimes, the people who look the most broken are the ones holding the tools that help others heal. If this story moved you, share it. And if you believe real hope still exists in unexpected places, subscribe to Momentum Stories, because the next story might remind you why humanity still matters.